Outlook.com or whatever, and then you get the service that you have your email and that you can send emails. And if you see it like this, infrastructure as a service is very comparable to running on-prem, because if you run on-prem, then you might have some virtual machines or something like this. So the learning curve is not so high moving to infrastructure as a service. And much what we see at our clients is that the first step into the cloud, the first baby step, is to go for infrastructure as a service, because the people at the clients know already these things, like how to maintain a Windows server. Okay. No problem. Hmm.
Do we need to repeat what he said? Did they catch that?
Yeah, that's a good question.
No.
Okay.
We'll just put a link up so we're good. They can find it.
Yeah.
I don't know if downtime has been the challenge for me, because most of the time it's not production yet, or you're migrating to it. I think that's the whole thing when we're working with customers, at least when I'm working with customers. I'm in the process of a migration and I optimize as I move. The thing that I've found is understanding where the bottleneck is. It may be different than where it was on-prem, and how I address that. I'm often addressing network latency, as well as IO latency. And remember, I do more Oracle. So, that's where my headaches are going to be. And I need to address those maybe with solutions that weren't available on premise. I'm looking for those solutions. Am I looking at services to get rid of some of that archaic on-prem features that they were utilizing before? I'm looking at configurations. We've dealt with ones lately that you get in there and you have DBAs that are setting up the drives, and they think they've striped the drive, but they've, remember, I'm Linux too, and they're using LVM commands, and they forgot the arguments to make sure that they're actually striped. So they're going, but I striped the drives. You're going there. No, you're writing sequentially to each one of those drives. When that one's filled, it's going to the next one. All of a sudden you're going, you're not actually writing in parallel to parallel drives. These are the things that we're dealing with, and you have to be able to have those tools to investigate it and find it. And for me, it's been challenging, because with Microsoft, even when I bring in an infrastructure person, they're like, I'm a Windows person. How did I get pulled in on this ticket? So I have to be ready to pick up and run and help them, even from the database standpoint.
Sorry. What do you think, Rob?
Okay.
Yeah, I was muted. Can you tune it without downtime, Rob?
I think it's really difficult. I think the things that you're tuning, if you're looking at infrastructure, it's the same as in your data center. It's the same as when you had a box in the brim cupboard that you ran everything on. If you wanted to add more RAM, you needed to add more RAM. Now, some things you can probably improve with a very small amount of downtime.
Yeah.
Now, Rob, you kind of talked about adding more RAM, and do we need to separate the idea of, are we physically tuning with hardware, throwing iron at it, and talking about logical tuning? I mean, we get into these answers of it depends, because we can say, oh, it's just tuning the SQL, and for me, I can go, I just added this materialized view, and it just sped up, and the customers are calling in going, I think it's broke. It's returning too fast. Those kind of things are uptime.
In a PaaS or a SaaS system, so platform as a service or software as a service, then you can just go, and basically you slide stuff to the right and your bill goes up. Sorry, and everything improves. Yeah? But with
You should add Oracle on top of that. Talk about the bill going up. Yeah.
But with if we're looking at tuning infrastructure, perhaps we should take another step backwards and say, what do we mean? Because to me, tuning infrastructure means that my application, okay, probably my database in this scenario, is not providing data quickly enough in some way, and it's not something that can be improved with, like you say, query tuning type. It can be improved by doing something to, add more RAM, add more cores, add more storage performance. And at an infrastructure level, I think those things are just as tricky to do without interruption, perhaps, should we say, rather than downtime, than they are when you do them in your own data center, because it's kind of the same thing.
Well, okay, let's step back a second. So we're talking about infrastructure as a service. So it means we are talking about, it is VMs, right? I mean, fundamentally, but so fine, whether or not we can tune, what we're tuning, how we're tuning, how do we measure? Because you don't just start tuning, right? You've got to measure first. So how do we measure? Anybody, Bob, Tim, jump in here.
Well,
Sure.
I mean, I can jump in. So Grant, I mean, to me, what Rob was saying is tuning infrastructure as a service is just about like tuning your local VM. I mean, if it's running on Hyper-V VMware on premises, I'm still looking for the same things. What are my file stats? What are my wait stats? What is my disk latency? CPU utilization, memory utilization, all of those things. And I'm using a lot of the same tools. Now, where Kellen was saying with networking, that could get a little bit more tricky in trying to find that bottleneck. But from the SQL guest or the OS guest that you're on, you can still say, I am being impacted by X from looking at all my tools and DMVs and things. Now, your initial question of, can you tune without downtime? Well, if it's applying an index and things like that, sure. But like Rob was saying, if I need more cores or my throughput is limited because I chose the wrong size VM to save a few dollars, then you have to resize. That resize is a reboot. It's quick, but it is a reboot.
Okay.
And I think.
Go ahead, Bob.
Or
Frank. Sorry.
I think it is the same than when you're running on-prem. If you're looking for really high availability, there is no way around something like maybe always on availability groups or
availability
zones or a cluster or something like this. Because if you don't, or if you cannot stand any minute of downtime, then you have to go for such solutions.
Okay.
But we have to have that conversation with our customers. Many customers will say they absolutely cannot have downtime. And when you have those discussions about what they have on-prem, that this is awesome, this is great. I have this with Oracle Rack all the time. And you find out they've been dealing with downtime the entire time. And saying, this wasn't HA. Let's talk about the right solution. What is your RPO? What is your RTO? What is your uptime requirements? And then dig into that and build the solution. Another challenge with infrastructure as a service is that I have the benefit when I'm working with Oracle, and hands down, automatic workload repository in Oracle. It was gold. Yeah, we love it, and there's a reason. When I get into the DMVs and the query store, that data isn't as static and retained the same way. And it is hard on the SQL Server side to say, historically, this is where all my wait events have been. I know I have automatically 8 days that's always on and always retained. And I can capture that and know when I have network waits and when I have some latency between the VM and the disk, how long it takes for it to get to that disk in the cloud on a VM environment for infrastructure as a service. And I can see that difference. I can even compare it with an ADDM comparison. I can't do that in SQL Server. I can do that between on-prem and infrastructure as a service for Oracle. I can do that. I mean, that's a big benefit, and I get to cheat with that.
And I think what's important as well is if we are talking about downtime and if we are talking about availability, we have also to talk about the price tag that comes with it. I think this is something most clients are not really aware. And when the clients are not so IT aware, then for sure, if you ask them how should your downtime be, then they would say, well, there should not be any downtime, because if there is downtime, it's broken. That's but that's not so true. And when you bring in the price tag, then they suddenly say, well, it's not so important.
It's that conversation, that dance of figuring out where they really want to be.
Yeah.
Right.
And then once you figure out where they want to be, then I architect it. I know that. But most of the time we come up with an answer. That's what I've always found. And then I architect that and hand it to them. And if I get pushback, there's usually, you got one person in the fold that says, no, that's not what I really wanted. And it's like, so is this coming out of your paycheck? And they suddenly back down. So, it's all right.
Well, okay. So, I mean, when we talk platform as a service, I feel very comfortable. I've been working in it for 10 years, 11 years. I'm very, I like it. I'm comfy. When we talk infrastructure as a service, I know it's just VMs to a degree, but I get really uncomfortable. And I've been working more and more in, I've been working in Azure for 11 years, 10 years, whatever it is, since it came out. But I've been working more and more in AWS. And this week, I even started working in Google Cloud. Oh my God, the number of choices that you have when you go to look for a VM. Like, we're not going to worry about the OS, right? I don't care if it's Linux or one of the 22 flavors of Linux or Windows. How do I pick a VM? I mean, what is the difference between the 4-core with 8 gigs and the 4-core with 8 gigs and this other thing? And
many times it's at the throughput. Look at the limits. For me, again, it's I/O. When I'm looking at E-Series, and we're going back to Azure on this, E-Series versus M-Series, they can have the same memory allotment, they can have the same CPU, but then you look at the limits on how much I/O throughput, I have to take that into consideration. When I do these calculations, and it scares people when they're seeing these spreadsheets, that pulls out from AWR all the CPU calculations to figure out. I grab the PGA and the SGA from the advisor, not what they have allocated, to make sure that they're going to move to something that's sized correctly. Calculate that all out, and then I take those values and look at what is available in Azure. I'm going to say, can they fit into an E-Series? Are they locked down to 400 millibytes per second? That's all the throughput they can get. It doesn't matter how fast a disk I'm putting on the back of that. They're going to be locked down. If they say, I still want to go to E-Series, then I may bring a service in. And that's when we start talking about optimizing. Something like when I bring in Azure NetApp files, I'm able to build out a capacity pool. And that capacity pool works like an array that they can pull from in disk. And they're not locked in at the VM limit. They're now pulling directly from the disk. And I'm able to get them the throughput that they need. I can stripe those disks directly, things like that I start employing to work around those limits that they would run into if they just used a single VM and put the disk directly, managed disk on that. So those are things that I'm thinking about all the time when I'm working with these and making those decisions.
Bob, you've been quiet, and you are not normally quiet.
Well, talking about disk there, and this is kind of a tuning thing. I had a client a couple of years ago that they were doing infrastructure as a service. So they had SQL Server running on a Windows VM in Azure, and they had, kind of like you were just explaining, Kellen, they had the direct disks hooked up, and they were subject to the, among other things, the 4 terabyte size limit that was in place at the time, and I believe still is current. And they were running up against that limit. So I was coming into the engagement from a database standpoint, but it was hey, we need to tune this database. You only have X amount of disk space, so find that one index that will fit on the disk and solve all our problems for us. At which point I was trying to find a tactful way to come to them and say, if you're making decisions like this and you haven't even gone live yet, you've already failed. Which they didn't like hearing too much, but the truth at that point was, fortunately they were still in the design phase, so it was something that could be re-architected at that point.
It's tuned for time, or you're wasting time. That's my feeling. So when I'm looking at my AWR report, I'm looking at what is taking up the most time. I've seen way too many DBAs that spin and work so hard tuning something, and they see no time savings at the end. And then they're like, I put so much effort into this, and you feel for them. You absolutely feel for them. So I have always made it a point that I must have data. I have customers right now that are spitting and cursing at me because I will not move forward until I have the data. It's just the way I am, because otherwise I'm wasting everybody's time and not doing my job. So it is essential. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like trying to answer questions on the forums, and the question's so vague. It's just like, I don't know, spend more money, it'll fix it.
Yeah. It'll be back in 6 months, but yeah, you fixed it for now. Natural life of a database is growth, people.
But hey, they'll be somewhere else in 6 months. So that's somebody else's problem.
Yeah.
Oh, don't tell me that. I'm not going anywhere.
I think coming back to your original question, I think it's hard. Is the honest answer. It's hard to know which VM you should choose. It's hard to know. Sometimes with the application that you've got, whether it's memory heavy or whether it's CPU heavy or whatever. I've had conversations with third-party vendors this week where I've asked questions which are, this appears to be quite a heavy, chunky data lifting application. You say it has to be on a virtual machine in Azure. Which one do we choose? The application is your application. What is best? What your customer's saying is best. Is it a memory? Is it a CPU? Is it a storage? What are we needing here? And they're looking at me like, I don't know. Because
Please tell me it wasn't us.
No, it's no.
Because I would have given you an answer even if it was wrong.
So Rob, do you have a way that you go into the servers on the application tier and grab all of that data? And I'm saying from Windows, that you're going to grab that historical data of what resource usage. Because if I'm on a Linux server and someone says, Kellen, we also need you to look at the application tier. We don't have that expertise. I'm going to go out there and say, do I have SAR reports? I don't have that. Okay, let's just grab some IO stat. Give me some data from some different peak workloads, and let's take a look at this, calculate it up. I have one customer that they literally were running their big queries serially. And so I had them grab those snapshots, ask them how many do they think they want to run in parallel, calculated it all together, and that's the size of the box I created. I mean,
on Windows, you'd go to perfmon. You'd go to those performance monitor statistics. I'd just go and grab those with some PowerShell, chuck it into import Excel and bring them into an Excel and then just go, here we go. But that still doesn't always answer the question about that might give you an idea as to which series of box to take. But that's not necessarily going to tell you which size box to take all of the time.
It tells you the CPU and the memory, though, doesn't it?
It does, but it doesn't necessarily tell you that that's going to be the same over here in the cloud, because you're not really sure what you're running on over there.
So there's calculations out there. In each one of the series, you can take a look at it. There's a link, and we've got them. We do them for E series and M series on the Linux boxes, that tells you how to calculate from CPU and memory into the calculations on vCPU and VRAM and everything. And we use that in spreadsheets. So I punch in the numbers and it goes in. So I don't have to do this by hand every time. And what outputs on our Excel spreadsheet, it translates it over to vCPU and vMemory. Nice. I'd be glad to share it if you're interested in looking for it. I know it's Linux, but
no, I know that it's. I think it's always a sign. I to be honest, in this conversation, it was we are going to do what the vendor recommends.
Yeah.
So
I don't trust vendors.
No, but there's a supportability thing here. So
did you hear that? Did you hear that? Yeah. Sorry, Grant.
I guess now would also be a good time to point out that one of the more forgiving natures of the cloud is if you do size your machine improperly, the correct size adjustment is, a few clicks and a reboot away. It's not like an on-premises where, we need to add memory to this host or add something else to be able to run this. I need a bigger virtual machine now. Okay, 5 clicks later, you can add that up.
But
I admit. I was going to say, I admit in my calculations, there's an average vCPU and vMemory that is being utilized in IOPS, and then there's a peak, and we have fudge numbers in there to take into consideration something they left out, like their month-end reporting or their year-end stuff. We're trying to give just a little bit of wiggle room in there. So I agree with you. It's nice that you can up, but especially IO, I don't want to get there. I don't want to go there.
And on the other hand, what's interesting as well is that you can easily scale down as well. So often when we are looking what is a really good tool to see what's going on is the Azure Monitor, where you can see how for example, how the CPU is and stuff like this. And when you see a machine, and for example, you're looking at the last 30 days, and you see the machine is always maybe 5% or maybe 3% or something like this, and you can say, well, we can save a lot of money here by just scaling down, because the machine literally is doing nothing.
You can also save money just by creating an Azure automation that's going to only keep the box on during working hours. Not for
excellent
some things, but I had a client who's like we're getting more developers in. Our jump box needs more power, and the PM said, I don't have any money in the budget for them to have more power. And I went, okay, but look, you're paying for this machine to be on 24 hours a day. How about if we only had the machine on 12 hours a day and doubled the resources? And they went, you can do that? I'm like, sure. And it
we did exactly the same for one of our clients who has a Navision system, and for some reasons we have this Navision system as infrastructure as a service, and we're doing exactly the same thing, because there is no point in running such a system 2 in the night or something like this, because no one will work with this.
Right. Well, let me ask another question. So I'm used to be famous at my last company for they even said it twice at company-wide meetings, and we're talking a 10,000 person company. It's not the database, right? That was always my answer. When it's like, oh, something's wrong. Well, it's not the database, because we had good monitoring in place and we could always tell. And if I didn't say it's not the database, I didn't say anything, because it probably was the database. But I was constantly saying it's not the database. How do we know it's not the cloud? Right? How do we know it's not, either Microsoft is messing me up, or, and I'm not picking on you, Google, AWS. How do I know my vendor's not messing me up, and or how do I know that my choice in VM or infrastructure size? What if it's just my network? What if it's just my latency? What if it? How do I? I mean, because somebody's going to want to be me and say it's not Azure, it's you, right?
Yeah. We had issues when the pandemic first started, where everybody was working from home, and the VPNs all got overloaded. And if you looked at it, you would have said, "Oh, we are having trouble connecting to all of these things that are in the cloud," because they were the ones going that. But actually, the VPN was just overloaded, and they need to exploit it. How do you tell? Excellent question.
So I'm going to admit to something. No, I'm going to admit to something, though. And I know this for AWS. I don't know about Google Cloud, but I can also tell you Oracle Cloud has this as well. There are internal tools. If you open up a ticket, they can go and look. I have something that we have an internal tool. We can't share it with customers, called Host Analyzer, and allows us to get all of that data. It's saved us I don't know how many times. For me, when I have a database problem, the first thing I'm going to do is go through all the steps. I had a customer that we installed Oracle Enterprise Manager inside their cloud on a VM, and she's like, I can't connect to it. I've built this out. I followed all your instructions, and it doesn't work. So we went through the troubleshooting and verified everything was right. We found one configuration difference in our listener. We fixed that, but we were able to verify it wasn't the database. It wasn't the server. We know now to move to Host Analyzer and onto their network. And we were able to verify, we weren't able to identify what the problem was, but we were able to verify that it was in their network VPN firewall issues that they need to go fix. It isn't on Microsoft, it isn't on the cloud, and it isn't in the database or configuration at the app tier.
Okay.
There are lots of monitoring built into these cloud systems and external that are going to enable you to look at a large portion of that statistics. But you've got to know what's normal to be able to go, oh, hang on a minute, that looks wrong.
I mean, having,
because it could be, oh, you've suddenly, you know, classic example, marketing haven't told you that they're going to do, you know, a massive saving on most popular product, and you've suddenly got 2 million people hitting your application. You know, it's nobody's fault. Stuff's going to start going slowly. So,
I mean, you definitely have to be monitoring it to be able to measure it. I mean, what is normal, what is abnormal, you know, kind of thing, to be able to catch, like Rob said, yeah, hey, what's changed? Nothing. Oh, well, we just added another 10,000 users. Well, that's something.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, that's a slight change.
But, you know, when it's in the cloud versus on premises, and is this a cloud thing? Is it a us thing? You know, we don't know. In the Azure portal, you have your monitoring area. You have there's also the resource health and performance diagnostics, and Microsoft is very transparent when it comes to them having problems, almost too aggressively so. You know, oh, we're having a problem, and they may not be able to put out all the information because they don't know. And you're like, you know, is this affecting me or not? And then, you know, stuff will start trickling out. And I can't brag on the, you know, Twitter Azure support enough. You're having a problem, tweet out. They have an army of people that are responding, and it might not always be the best, you know, response, but it's something.
I mean, I kind of hate it because I just want to whine occasionally on Twitter, and I get those people responding to me in serious tones, like, no, it's so cool.
But that's one of the benefits, I think, of IaaS is that for me, you know, Oracle Enterprise Manager is my infrastructure tool of choice. That's what I want. And for DBAs that are coming over to the cloud, especially when we're telling those Oracle DBAs they're going to Microsoft Azure, they're freaking out already. That I can say, we're going to build Oracle Enterprise Manager on a VM. You're going to have the same infrastructure tools you had on-prem. That takes a lot of the learning curve out, and they're able to work a lot more effectively and manage it. Another challenge we've had is that, you know, for me, I want Oracle Linux, but it's not supported and doesn't build into Azure Monitor. So I'm limited. So I will be more likely to push customers to Red Hat so that they do have that support. And of course, CentOS is completely bought in on Azure Monitor, but I have to tell them, you're not putting an Oracle database on that. No. And I have to walk them back.
All right, let me ask you another question. So we've talked some about, you know, VM choice and sizing, and, you know, some of the infrastructure monitoring. Storage. How do we tune storage? I mean, because you can't start well, you know, I mean, this whole Azure thing's great, but I want to buy Pure and install it. So Microsoft, here's my Pure box, go install that. But I got to start picking on Microsoft. Here, Google, here's my Pure box, go install that. How do you tune storage?
So I do have to do that often. IO intensive databases is where I'm at. I'm stuck with that because most of my customers are on, you know, terabyte databases. I've got a lot of new deployments that are doing everything from 1 to 7 terabytes, depending on the size of the deployment that they're doing for their new customers. And for us, we have to find out what that IOPS is. And then we decide, we're doing a lot of times, you get that customer who says, well, it's a 1 terabyte database, so I'm going to get a 2 terabyte drive. Well, it's old school. Go back, get smaller drives, stripe them, get better performance.
Yeah.
Or we go to Azure NetApp files and again, bypass those VM limits. You need to find out, is it throughput, you know, is it IOPS or is it megabytes per second that you're having problems with? And then when they get down to it, what are their actual SLAs? I have one customer right now, surprised me in the end that they have a 20-minute backup that they need to complete. And they were putting it, you know, through blob fuse with RMAN to blob storage. That ain't going to cut it. You know, I have to take those into consideration. And we ended up going back to managed disk, striped, and back up there. So we can tune, but there's even a new Pure Storage offering that's in private preview right now to be used with the Azure Cloud. So keep in mind, there's a lot of companies that are starting to do this. Commvault, Veeam. There's tons of them out there that I can utilize that help me out. And many of those for me, as an Oracle person, they already are using those RMAN utilities. The SDKs are built into their product, so it makes life very easy for me.
Oh, cool. Did not know
Some
that.
things are back to your own, your own knowledge of what you do on-prem. You want TempDB to be on the fastest disk.
Yeah.
The fastest disk on a cheaper VM is going to be the D drive in a infrastructure in Azure, sorry, and that is going to be transient. So anything that's on there gets thrown away. So sounds like a good place to put TempDB. And if you've got you pick the right VM with the SSDs there for the TempDB, and do a little bit of work to make sure that you've got your TempDB files in the right place. Sometimes you need to create folders or just twitch a little bit on startup. Then suddenly you've for nothing, because the D drive's there. It's always going to be there. You've got tuned TempDB, and this is down at this scale. Obviously, if you get up into bigger VMs, then you're going to have the faster storage there. But it's a neat little way of bringing some extra performance quickly to cheaper VMs.
But on the other hand, I think what's interesting here is that if you're running, for example, a SQL Server on a VM, no one will keep you from misconfiguring it. So no one will. Yeah, it's the same like on-prem. Yeah. No one will keep you from installing SQL Server by next finish. It will run maybe, but it will not be the best performance you can get, because this is one of the dangers of infrastructure as a service. You are responsible for what you're installing, and you have to know what you're doing. And if you don't know, then you won't get any good SQL Server performance. The only thing you can do then is to just blow up the machine and have a gigantic machine to run your workload fast. But I don't think that's the way to go.
Okay, well, I mean, that leads me to my next question. So fine, I've given AWS my VMs. Here you go. They're doing the backups, right?
What's your retention? And what's your retention that you need to keep?
I don't know. I mean, you guys
because they
you guys
got a
have
set time, yeah.
You guys have the backups, don't you? I mean, what? What about the stuff inside the machine? I mean, are you guys backing up the the OS or the SQL Server?
Infrastructure as a service.
Oracle is Oracle getting backed up inside?
No, and
are those things backed up on your data center that you've moved from? And that's the same answer.
Same answer.
Yeah, it's infrastructure as a service. You're getting the place to put it.
No,
You're
it's the
deciding
cloud.
what you put.
But I thought I thought when we threw everything on the cloud,
it's managed.
You guys are.
If you tick the right boxes, then you can get more things backed up.
Bob, who are you pointing to? Since we're all seeing different pictures above ours.
I was pointing to the cloud.
He's got the clouds there.
Oh, the cloud.
Yeah, see, they're up there.
I thought maybe he was saying what Grant said, and I'm like going, what did Grant just say that I should listen to?
Nothing. As usual.
For me, because I have a free and that limited, I'll say this right, limited enterprise edition license that comes with RMAN repository, my customers can build another VM, infrastructure as a service, put their RMAN repository out there. They can put out Oracle Enterprise Manager, and they can manage everything from a GUI and anything else that they want if they're comfortable. And they back it up to blob storage and save it real cheap. But they're in control. They decide the retention. They set up the custom templates. So they have a range of IP addresses. As soon as a server and a database comes online, it says, do you want to monitor it? And they say yes, and it sets everything up. I'm all about automation. You know that.
Sure.
Patching, all of it, I automate. I create as close to a PaaS solution with Oracle on Azure as you can get. A lot closer than EC2. I'm just letting you know. Okay, just throwing it out there. But that's my goal. That's what I'm trying to provide as an Oracle SME. Now, when you create, people are like, oh, well, I can just go out to AWS and I can buy the license and I can buy, a PaaS solution. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get their AWR. I want to look at their parameters and find out if there's something they shouldn't be bringing over to a PaaS solution, because that's the truth for most Oracle databases. I can't validate that for SQL Server. I can just tell you it's the truth for Oracle. EC2, very similar situation that we have for Oracle on Azure, is that we are building out these environments and we are responsible for those backups. And personally, what we find with AWS, and same thing if we were to have a PaaS solution in Azure, you would have like 30 days of backups, and that DBA would be responsible for making sure there's more if you need it. Whatever your retention time is, you're responsible outside of what the cloud is responsible for.
Huh. Well, that stinks.
But it does, but also actually in Azure, certainly, you can pay more money, Grant. If you just tick a few more boxes, you can pay more money. But the advantage of paying more money is that you then, just as you would with a PaaS or a SaaS offering, you then pass over the responsibility to perform those backups.
Okay.
So you can use in Azure Backup for SQL Server in a VM or something. I can't remember the precise title. It's along
like
those lines.
managed backups. I think it's little friendly name.
Cool. If you know the friendly name, go.
And hopefully I will have that service for Oracle soon. And I hope the PMs are listening to this. So just saying that. But at this point, I don't have that capability, so I have to control it. And
isn't there a PM
DBA,
near
I
you?
like having it.
Don't you have a PM near you, like right now? No, he's not. He's not a PM. Oh.
No, I don't.
Okay. All right. So let me ask another question. So I've got them here. What about licensing? So I've decided to set up this thing, and so for example, on Azure, I can just say, hey, I want a SQL Server instance, and it will create a infrastructure as a service SQL Server with SQL Server already installed. How does that affect the licenses that I have?
You mean between purchasing them and bringing your own license?
Yeah, if I purchase licenses, what happens with the whole infrastructure as a service thing?
Yeah, what you can do is there is what Kenan already said is that you can bring your own license. So when you're moving to the cloud, you can, and you have a license on-prem, you can at least in Azure you can bring your own license, and I think there is a grace period of 180 days or something like this where you can run in parallel. So you can run it on-prem and you can run it in the cloud to do the migration to the cloud. And the other thing is, if you're in the Azure portal or in the Azure store, and if you purchase a virtual machine with an already installed SQL Server, the license is within this. So by paying the money for running this machine, you're already paying the license. And the interesting thing is that you are only paying when the machine is running. So if you have some kind of weird situation where you only need a SQL Server Enterprise Edition once a month, you only pay once a month for it when you run it. And when you don't use it and when you have shut it down, then you don't pay anything for it. And on the other hand, if you scale it up or if you scale it down, you are always right license, because if you buy a machine with a SQL Server from the portal.
Okay.
So I have a question. For the Oracle side, we have unlimited license agreements, and those can't come over to the cloud. They must be migrated to cloud user agreements on Oracle. Is there anything like that on Microsoft's side where they had like unlimited, you could use as much as you want and they had to migrate over? I'm just curious because I don't know that. I avoid licensing at all costs.
Only
Me
your-
too. I'm asking this question because I partly I'm asking this
don't
question
know.
because I literally don't know some of the answers. I mean, I do know that you're
It's
paying for
cheaper
your
to bring your own license.
Right,
Yeah.
but-
Oracle, we say you don't want to go to, like AWS will say you can just get your license here. You're paying buku money to do that. We tell them, AWS will tell you, bring your own license, get it from Oracle and bring it over.
Right.
It's much cheaper if you're trying to save money.
I'm sorry, Tim. I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say the only like true unlimited would have been like SQL Server 2008, where it was socket based and things. Then we went to core based, and you could license all the cores in the physical host and essentially run unlimited VMs. But you typically lose all of that when you go to the cloud, because now you are truly paying per logical core. There's no physical logical. It's what the VM sees is what you're licensing. So the bring your own license, yes, you could, but I could have a 20 physical core machine running 80 logical, and that's going to be 80 cores in the cloud. So there's that to consider when you're moving.
So one more.
Because my
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say my licenses, when I'm doing my calculations, takes into consideration if it's hyper-threaded or not. And that's, I have to license for that and say, you know, we're going to charge 2 for every 1 if you were doing CPU versus vCPU with hyper-threading.
So I'll ask the next question. I mean, I'm sure I already know the answer, but I want to hear you guys say it. So one of the ways, you know, we talked pretty early on, you know, I mean, you're going to right size your machine. When we determined that we didn't right size the machine, and we decide that, you know, okay, we're just going to change those settings, do the reboot like you guys described. So now we've gone from 8 core to 16 core, whatever. Does that affect my licenses?
I've never had that
If you
happen. I can answer you. I'm always sizing right.
if you if you bought the machine from the Azure store with the SQL Server on it, then sure you are licensed, because you're paying the license through the compute core.
But if I haven't bought it through AWS, like she was talking about, if I've brought my own,
Yeah, it's no different than on premises. If you go from 8 to 16, you get your audit, you're retroing, and I mean you have to then go and acquire 8 additional core based license.
you got to true up.
And Oracle sends the guys with the guns and the dark glasses, and yeah, you never want to see them. Yeah.
Yeah. They have
License
black
right.
helicopter.
Yeah.
Here's a question I was asked that I don't know the answer to. I was asked today, is you're charged per second, per minute for these things. When you make that change, does it start charging you from when you go, yes, I want it, or does it start charging you from when it's actually finished making the change?
I don't know. Yeah. I don't have
I
that
don't know.
answer.
Yeah.
I think I know, but I don't work for any of the vendors. I mean, I work for a vendor, but I don't work for the vendors who actually know. I believe it starts charging you after it finishes configuring.
Logically.
And the
that's
reason
not
I
right.
say that is because I've run over my limit many times, and I've been able to make changes as I go, and I see when it kicks off, and because I've hit my limit so many times, I actually have quite a lot of experience in how to manage it better.
I know that if you're destroying a resource of some sort, you still carry on paying until it's destroyed.
Yep.
So when you think, my credits are going down, and you try and run something to destroy it, you don't.
On the
Yeah,
other
I
hand,
get
this is also a very interesting question if we're talking about things which take a little time in the cloud. For example, building a managed instance. It takes maybe 1 to 2 hours for the managed instance to show up, or if we're talking about a Kubernetes cluster or something like this, which really takes time. But this is a very valid question to ask: when do I start paying for this?
But it's the network piece that's taking so much longer when I'm watching it. You know, I do everything from command line, and I've always noticed for the managed instance, it's the network piece.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody else has watched it, but I do everything from the command line. I don't watch
All
it.
I'm going to say about
Yeah,
managed instances, I try not to watch it.
I terraform stuff, so I just go checking some code, walk away.
Yep.
And then it's done. But it's I think managed instances is a whole load of clustering stuff going on underneath. That's
Well, let
which
me
is
ask,
why when you scale those, it really does take some time, because it's got to create another cluster and move everything over, and it's very interesting. Sorry,
check.
Grant.
So I'm just checking the live chat to see if anybody's asking questions. They have not. Cool. And there are several people on, so just so you know. The other question I have is, okay, so cool. We've got this whole infrastructure as a service. We've done all the work. We've set it up. Maybe we've even sized it correctly and all that fun stuff. We're monitoring and using mostly traditional counters, as you guys said, right? Cool. How do I best automate the management of these things? What's the right way to manage the infrastructure as a service tools? Or tools is the wrong word, but you know what I mean.
The creation,
Or after they're up.
They're up.
Yes.
All of it.
All of the above.
Use this. So use the skills that let's call them the run team or the build team are going to be comfortable with using. Automate things as much as possible. You can use PowerShell, you can use AZ CLI for Azure, you could use Terraform, you can use ARM, but
Okay.
automate it,
Break
script
that.
it.
Yeah. I'm not arguing with you,
I know.
but could you guys break it down a little bit? Just
Yeah.
Okay. So CLI. What do we got there for command line? What?
So you can use just about anything. What I would say is, because you're going to have different skill sets and different teams. I really like the AZ commands over like the PowerShell dedicated commands for working within Azure, because those can translate across any scripting plan. Somebody says, well, I write in Perl. I write, in PowerShell. I write in Bash. I write in Terraform. They go across all of that. So I love that. The ability to get from a siloed team, which is always the biggest challenge in DevOps, and getting them all working together to find out who has what skills and what's already built, and can you recycle any of it and evolve it and get a streamlined pipeline. The next is images, because for me, I can't use marketplace images. Also, what shows in the portal isn't what's really in Azure. So learn the command line, because you will be so surprised how many images aren't showing up in there. So if you need a certain flavor, if you need a certain offering, go out there and look from the command line to find out what is available, because otherwise you could be missing out on a lot of options. So we build that all out, get it streamlined. Anything that's manual, anything that there's a handoff between teams, get rid of it. And then build that out and build an image library. Don't go and install every time. Don't go and do any manual steps. Build it into the image, package it up, and then streamline it. Yeah, please.
And when you are scripting everything, the big advantage is that it's very easy to tear down things and to build them up again, because maybe you just messed up that you didn't choose the right SQL Server version or SQL Server edition or whatever, and it's very easy. Just change a little bit of code and run it again, and then you're fine. But saying
it's a great way to answer the project manager's question of how can we prove we've got DR. Hang on a minute. Let me just delete the resource group.
Sure.
Watch them go white.
Yeah.
And go. It's okay. There we go. It'll be back.
And maybe what we were talking right now is how to automate all the things within Azure. But what we can do as well is we can automate things within the VMs, because we're running infrastructure as a service. And what we can use, for example, for SQL Server are the DBA tools, which are very cool to automate stuff.
Don't forget Azure Automation.
Yeah, Azure
built-in scheduler there, and
Yeah.
tons of run books already exist for many of the mundane routine tasks that you would want to do.
And
even
Power
deploying
Apps.
like Ola Hallegren's scripts across all the machines. I mean, all of this stuff. Somebody else smarter than me has built those things and put them out there, and I'm fully capable of taking and manipulating their code to my evil devices.
I will say when I first started out at Microsoft, I figured out how to do things in the portal, and then I reverse engineered them and figured out how to do them with Bash with my AZ commands. Then I found the GitHub solutions from Microsoft and found out I had wasted so much time, it wasn't even funny. So knowing that those are out there, that I had written something for someone just recently about that, of using image libraries, of using these GitHub solutions. In fact, I just did that presentation for the virtual pass this week. So I'm like, when did I do that? This week? I've lost complete track of time. I put links in there saying, this is how you automate, this is how you make it simpler. But also knowing that it's not just about the infrastructure, it's not just about the database, it's also about the code. So, most of the time they're handing it off and there's these huge legs in time, or somebody gets, sidetracked into a drive-by or something else they're working on, and you don't end up with that finalized piece. Because, IT is filled with ADHD. I mean, we've got to get to the final piece. And so I'm looking with things, and forgive me if I say this, Grant, but, like I just did a presentation with Liquibase and saying, we can do, no matter if it's SQL Server, no matter if it's Oracle, Sybase, whatever you want, we can do the SQL part of this and plug it into Terraform or plug it into Azure DevOps and have them do the database deployment along with the code deployment and the objects, and do checks on it and verify it. And if something goes wrong, roll it back. Yep. Those are really powerful tools for DBAs.
And you can put your infrastructure into the same pipeline.
Yep.
Cool.
We're now adding all of this amazing functionality for the new stuff that's coming. We need all of these applications. We need all of this database. Our infrastructure needs to scale up. Put them all together.
Excellent.
And if you're not so familiar with GitHub, what you can look for as well are the Azure Quick Start templates, because this is a website where there are templates for certain environments, and you can easily just deploy them to your own subscription. And the only thing you have to do is there are some parameters you have to put in, like username, password, how the machine will be called, and things like this. And you can very easily and very smoothly, directly from a website, publish it to your own subscription. And if you don't trust the people who published this, you can also edit the templates and then just have a look what they are deploying there and what they're doing. And you can tailor it for your own use.
Stupid thing. All right. Technology. We've only got a couple of minutes left. First, I want to say thank you very much. You guys have been great, and we've gotten a few comments. Dirk Hondong says,
"Hello, Dirk."
Yeah, he said really cool talk. Gene Daniel says great talk. So we've gotten some good comments. So this is useful for people. So thank you guys so much for doing this. It's really cool. Now, want to do it again?
Sure.
Cool.
Sure. Always. Yeah. I need a break from customers, please.
Oh yeah. Okay. Excellent.
I love you, customers.
You guys are invited back. And anybody else I can rope in, I will. What would you like to talk about? I want to tease the people who are still out there listening. It doesn't have to be
services. I think services to evolve your data platform. I don't know about everyone else, but a lot of times, it's like, okay, we got our database out there. How do we evolve it? There's so many cool stuff, especially for me doing a lot of Exadata migrations. Oracle people are like, well, what does Microsoft have? And I start talking about Synapse. And I like to, if you guys know Azure DW, I start joking about it being the love child between Azure and the Exadata. When I started having these conversations, people are surprised. They have no idea that services like, Azure Data Factory and all of these that can come out and kind of evolve those data platforms. And I think it's cool.
Okay. I think that sounds fair unless someone else has a better idea.
Throw them out there. That's just one idea.
Cool. Well, and if something else comes up, send me an email. Otherwise, we'll just start wrapping this one up. thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. I really do. I just can't say that often enough. This has been really cool. I've learned a bunch of stuff. I mean, I knew some things coming in, but this is not my strength. So I really appreciate listening to you guys talk. So I think if it was helpful to me, it's going to be helpful to others because I'm not the smartest tack in the box, but I know that other people are going to need the same stuff. All right, cool. We're going to wrap this one up, shut it down, and I appreciate your time. And you guys have a great weekend.
Yeah.
You too.
Have a great
Thanks.
weekend.
Bye-bye.
You too.
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.